Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And yes, it's the old happy chappy back here again. And I want to cover a bit more of South African history in this video. And you know, early on my holiday in South Africa, I had the great pleasure to meet a fascinating individual who is also, like me, a historian, but specializes in the Boer War. And his name is Rob Milne. That's M-I-L-N-E. And Rob is a very interesting personality. Let me put it that way. Everybody in Magalies knows him. You go somewhere with Rob and, you know, you're suddenly meeting half of the community in some bar or some shop or wherever you go. Everybody knows Rob. You know, he arrives at a hotel or he goes to a farm and, hey Rob, come on in and have a cup of tea. He's one of those guys, okay, much liked and much admired. And Rob, as I mentioned earlier, is a historian. And he took me to one of the lesser known battles or skirmishes between the British and the Boers that took place in October 1900, very close to Magalies. And I'm going to show you a map. I'm going to show you a sketch map as well, so you get the idea of where the whole thing happened. But basically, with this battle, the Boers had already placed over 1,000 men, almost like in a semicircle, around a very narrow gateway along an ox wagon route that the British had to go through. And of course the British, with something like 1,500 men and a huge amount of baggage that they were taking for supplies and stuff like that, and they were caught in this cauldron. Let me just show you those maps just so you get your head around what we're talking about here. So, I was staying at Mount Grace at the time, which is very close to Magalies, and Rob picked me up and he took me through the town of Magalies onto the R400, which is a road just a few kilometers out of Magalies, and it goes north. And as you go along the road just a few kilometers, you'll see on your left-hand side a chicken farm. And that chicken farm happens to be right in the middle where the Battle of Dwarsvlei, the battle I've been talking about here, took place. Let's have a look at a couple of photos. Now, you'll notice in those photos that it's a very, very undulating bit of ground. Even though when you look at it from Google Earth or from satellite maps, it looks totally flat. It ain't. It's sort of like rolling. So perfect for people or contingents of people to hide behind, while some British forces going straight into the jaws of the lion, if I can put it that way. So, as I mentioned, the chicken farm, which you see on your left-hand side, and you'll see a ridge above the chicken farm, are basically the identifiers of where the Battle of Dwarsvlei took place. And just an incredible situation. The stupidity of the British, once again, reigns supreme. So, after we basically looked at where the Boers had lined this ridge, which just for the record, just where the road that you travel along goes, the ridge disappears. It's no longer something that you can't climb up or navigate. If the British had used a little bit of this stuff, they would have thought, hang on, we can actually go around the back of this ridge and attack the Boers who are sitting on the ridge from behind. But common sense back then apparently was missing in action. So Rob then took me to where the old wagon road went. And I'm going to show you some photos here. And you're going to see the old wagon road. You're going to see some game, because it's now actually in a game park. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. Let me show you those few photos. And it was a very poignant moment for Rob personally, because, as I said, he's a very outgoing, very sociable sort of person, and he happens to know the descendants of one of the soldiers, the British soldiers, who was killed in that battle. And it happened, he was killed to the day, 125 years before we actually stood on that old ox wagon road, just meters away from where he was shot dead by the Boers. And Rob had said to the family back in the UK that, look, we're going to put up a cairn of stones for Lieutenant William Ellis, and that's what we did. And I'll show you the photos. So that was basically done on the spot, where this, he was young. He was about 21 years old, I think. You know, he was a youngster, was killed. And anyway, to find out more about Lieutenant William Ellis, you're going to have to go on a guided tour with Rob. And I'll put his contact details below this video. Believe me, it's worth your time. Just for the record, we landed up after the tour at a local watering spot called the Black Horse. And it was amazing. I mean, I walked in there with Rob. No one knew who I was, but everybody was saying, hello, Rob, hello, Rob. And because they all knew Rob, they suddenly all knew me. And it was an amazing, amazing community to meet. And fantastic time. Anyway, getting back to the story. Now, Rob is not only a tour guide, he also has a museum. Yes, you heard me right. He has a museum at Africa Hills, which is one of the amazing hotels in the Muldersdrift, Magaliesburg, that sort of area of Western Gauteng, I guess you could say, just west of Krugersdorp. And his museum has the best collection of ox wagons, from medical wagons used during the Boer War to supply ox wagons to whatever type of ox wagon you can think of. He's got the lot. It's amazing. It's all, and they're beautifully restored by Rob. I mean, it is an amazing collection. Let me show you some of the photos I took of the ox wagons. You will see if you go to or go on a guided tour or stay at Africa Hills, and while you're there, ask to go on a tour with Rob. Or if you're just staying at African Hills, you can actually just go and have a look at the museum. Here they come. Now, one of the most interesting, and really, when you think of what the British did to the Boers, it's rather like karma, but it's very, very tragic what happened. There was a battle called Nooit Gedacht, which happened, you can actually see it from Africa Hills. There's this large rocky outcrop above Africa Hills to the west, and you can see these big 5G towers and telecommunication towers right on the top of it. Literally at that point, the Boers overran a British position where they were using these instruments. They were using sunlight that came through, and they were flashing like Morse code directly to another position in another part, because it was so high. It was just elevated, and it was just a perfect spot. They were caught by the Boers, and they were so infuriated by what Lord Roberts was doing to the Boer women and children, and the burning of their farms and stuff like that. They didn't even bother to shoot them or let them surrender. They basically pushed the British, as I say, largely people using these machines to send SOS using sunlight, sending it directly. I've forgotten what the name is, but anyway, you get the gist, the brief. They pushed all these British soldiers over the cliff, 100-meter fall. They all died. It was just, you land on jagged rocks. This actually took place right there, and you can see it. But look, the amazing thing about this visit that I had, or this tour that I had, just one day with Rob Milne, was that it was an absolutely extraordinary, real. You're on the battlefield, you're actually walking around, he's telling you exactly what's going on. But before I get back to that, let me show you the photographs of Nooit Gedacht, and also a photograph today of where these British soldiers were thrown over the cliff.